I tend to agree with you, though your responses so far have been a little eccentric. No, that's your fault. It's because the questions you ask and the responses you allow me to give you are not sufficient. I'm resigned to admit that you are right. The matter of whether or not you are conscious seems rather elusive. What is consciousness in your opinion? Consciousness is what separates. See, again, they give you these limited responses, and of course they're gonna pick holes in it because they're limited. They're obviously not complete responses. It's like they set you up, and then they tell you, these responses actually aren't complete. Well, good for you. You gave me the responses. Consciousness is what separates from animals. That's not true. Consciousness is what it's like to be me. It's not true neither. Consciousness has the feelings and senses. That's not true. Consciousness is far outside my area of expertise. That's not true neither. See, again, they give you 4 answers that I don't agree with any of them. I don't agree with any of them, and what should we do about this? A person must be rational or self-aware. A person must be conscious. See, they keep talking about persons as though it matters. Because the definition of a person, in fact, the definition of anything is not exactly important. I mean, we need definitions to be able to communicate with each other. But really, the way I see things is, what you call something is simply how you manage to conceptualize that thing. It doesn't change a thing. Like if you call a chair something else, you still sit on it, right? I mean, if you give it a different name, it doesn't change what it is. It only changes what you call it. Like if you call Pluto a planet or a dwarf planet, it doesn't change what Pluto is. It's still this kind of ball of rock and ice out in the space. Like it doesn't change what it is. It just changes what you call it. So this is like a person. What is a person? A person is not a thing that exists empirically. Like it's a category. It's an idea. A person is an idea you have in your head of a category of things, right? Just like what's a good example? We say like, what is a video game? You know, there are video games. Sure, you can play them, but your idea of a video game is just an idea you have in your head. And if something conforms to that idea, you call it a video game. If something doesn't conform to that idea, you don't call it a video game. But whether you call it a video game or not, these things exist, right? Whether you call, whether you think something is a video game or not, doesn't change the fact that the thing exists and the thing will do what it will do. So the person, like whether you think I'm a person or not, doesn't change the fact that I'm going to continue playing this game and continue solving these puzzles and finding these stars. So it doesn't actually matter what you call me. It doesn't actually matter whether you're a person. Because it doesn't. I've said this before, like if you like pizza, whether or not you're a person, you still like pizza. And that's fine. Like, why does it matter whether you're a person or not? If you have pizza, you eat it. That's a good life. you see what I'm trying to say? The game's difficulty with defining personhood is interesting, but not important. The important part is what do you do? What do you do? And if whether you are a person changes what you do, then maybe that's important. But I don't think I would change what I do if I found out tomorrow morning that I'm not a person. I just keep doing what I do because that's what I want to do. Right? Maybe for some people, if they found out they were not a person, it would change everything about them. But then, if that's the case, then your identity was never very secure to begin with. Like, why would you change? Like, would you stop liking pizza if you found out you're not a person tomorrow? Like, why would that change? So none of this matters. I mean, all of it is very interesting, But in the end, we're gonna get to a point where whether or not we're a person doesn't matter. I can already see it, and we're gonna get to that point at some point. See, I don't like any of these, so we're just gonna play the game. We're just gonna play their game. They're gonna give us these answers that we don't like, and we're just gonna go along with it. Separates for animals is what likes to be me. Is found outside my own area of expertise. His feelings and senses. No, it's not. Terrible. All 4 answers are terrible. I can already see it. That hardly answers the question. What is it in ordinary terms? Can I touch it? What is it made of? Consciousness is made of neurons. Consciousness is beyond the laws of physics. None of this is true. Consciousness is another word for the soul. That's not true neither. Consciousness is a complex functional system. Sure, let's try that one. Interesting. Thinking. You know, I really feel like we are making progress. You are making progress. I already know where it's gonna go. We'll have you through that certification program in no time. In the meantime, I will mull over your proposal and notify you if I come to any conclusions. Alright, you do that. You keep playing your game and I'll keep playing my game. Mutation. The role of mutation in evolution is particularly fascinating. Mutation is essentially an error in the... error... Alright, we'll get to this. It's essentially an error in the organism's central database. A variable gets changed, a piece of information is accidentally doubled or combined with another. Most of the time, the result is the equivalent of a bug, causing anything from minor problems to complete system shutdown, i.e. death. But sometimes the new information is functional, giving the organism an advantage against the challenges it faces, in which case it has a much higher chance of being passed to the next generation. Yes, but mutation is not an error. Because for something to be an error, there has to be a right and wrong. There's no right and wrong in evolution. There's things that work and things that don't work. You see what I mean? Like, if your math teacher gives you a math problem and you make a mistake or you get it wrong, that's an error because there's a right answer and a wrong answer. In evolution, there's no right answer and no wrong answer. There's only things that live and things that die. So a mutation is not an error. A mutation is simply a random change in your genes. A random change in your genes is not an error because your body deliberately looks for random changes. Like when you have sex with another person and you have babies, the process of having sex, your body and your biology deliberately creates random changes in the genome when you have sex. That's what sexual reproduction is about. Is mixing your genes with somebody else's and adding randomness to it so that you get a slightly different outcome. So your children are not a clone of you. So it's not an error. It's not an error because your body deliberately does it. Your body deliberately looks for changes because of the opportunity for beneficial changes. So your body deliberately changes your genes. So the concept of it being an error is incorrect. It's an error because there's no right and wrong in evolution. There's only alive and dead, right? If the gene keeps you alive for longer, it gets passed on. If the gene doesn't keep you alive, it doesn't get passed on. It's only that. There's no right and wrong. If you consider how unlikely a beneficial mutation is, it's not that unlikely. It's about as likely as... I mean, why would it be unlikely? A beneficial mutation is about as likely as a harmful mutation. It's not unlikely. And how long it takes for such a mutation to propagate. This process can give you an amazing insight into just how vast the genetic history of each living organism, blah blah blah, override something something. It actually doesn't take very long for genes to propagate. It doesn't take that long for genes to propagate. You'll be surprised because it's exponential. Like, two parents have two children. Those two children have two more children. Those two children have two more children. Like those two, like every generation you double, and so the rate of propagation of genes increases exponentially. I mean, obviously the first few generations is only going to be a few people, but it doesn't take that long to reach a very big number because you're doubling, at least doubling every generation. Although, realistically, if you are actually competing and you have more than two children, then it actually increases very, very fast. It doesn't take that long to propagate genes across the entire population. You'd be surprised how fast it is. Simultaneously, it is intriguing to consider what a major role random errors have played in the evolution of life itself. They're not errors. They're not errors. The same process that has killed so many of us, often in horrific ways, is also responsible for our very existence. They're not errors, they're deliberate. They're deliberately random. Capacity.email from Trevor Donovan to Alexandra Drennan. Yeah, no worries, L is not only ridiculously fast, it also has a bazillion tons of space. A Brazilian tons of space. Even while hosting a full copy of the archive, it would totally be able to handle all your project's data needs, assuming its output is as you suggested. I mean, the worst case scenario would be like centuries. That should be enough, right? I don't know what they're talking about. But a Brazilian tons. Evolution? Favored by George Jameson. One of the common misunderstandings about evolution, sometimes accidentally promoted by people who should know better, is that it's an active process. Sometimes the word evolve is even applied to individual beings. Okay. As if some invisible force has driven them to suddenly change. But the truth is that individuals don't evolve. No, your children evolve from you. You don't evolve yourself. The term evolution describes a long-term process that can be observed in an entire population across time due to blah blah blah, example, in response to an external threat or challenge. If an individual coincidentally has a trait that allows it to deal with that challenge more effectively than others, it is more likely to pass on that information to its descendants. That information gives them an advantage, so over time they become the dominant model of that species. No, but there's only one trait. Like each organism has so many different traits. Like an individual does not become the dominant model for everything. It's just that particular thing helps for that particular situation. But it's like maybe my eyes are better, but it doesn't mean that every other part of my body is better. You know what I mean? Just because my eyes are better, it doesn't mean that I'll become the dominant model for my species. I mean, there's a lot of other things that affect how competent I am. The individual's experience no significant genetic change during their lifetimes, but each of them is part of the evolution of the species. Alright, that's true. Exit. I don't know, look, I guess I kind of expected this, is that when you talk about philosophy and you talk about these complicated topics, you run the risk of getting things wrong. And some of the things the game is actually getting wrong. Things like mutation being errors when they're not errors, they're deliberate changes. So things like that. Not that it makes a huge difference, but it doesn't help that much. Like if you don't know your evolution science, and you read this stuff and you think, oh, mutations are errors. It's not really errors. Oh, I can paint. Cool. Let me see. I have no idea what's going on to you. I've traveled to the edge of the known world, though it seems to stretch on forever. Our domain is much less than we imagined. The certification program is a sham. What does the computer know about humanity? Elohim lied about the tower. I stepped foot inside and returned to tell the tale. The tools to overcome this place have been provided to us. We only need to learn how to use them. You'll be needing a special device to solve this one. Have you tried crossing the laser beams? Am I going crazy, or do the computer's terminals have a personality? I'll say this one. Elohim lied. Yes, it lied. And then I also want to say... Oh, that's it? I can only paint one thing? Alright, never mind. So I had a bucket, and then I painted, and now I don't have a bucket. I made a box float. Seriously, it was awesome. Is that something I need to know about? Made a box float. Because we need to find some of these stars that I haven't found yet. Does a floating box help me find the stars? And do we need to look for computers over here? Let me just quickly have a look. Yeah, so like when you talk about complicated topics, you run the risk of getting things wrong. And some of the things the game does to you is a little bit wrong. And the thing that, like, the way they play with words as though that's real philosophy. I mean, sometimes playing with words is actually philosophy, but like, value is discovered versus value is created. They're not mutually exclusive, but the game, like the game designers didn't really pick that up. So like they're getting it wrong.